Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of the Volpe Creates Show. I am your host, Chris Volpe, joined by a baby who is in my lap sleeping, so I'm not going to pick her up. And of course, we have non-intern Lucas. How's it going? Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm kind of tired. It's been a week. So it's a pre-GDEX week, but we're forging ahead. And of course, every week we have a special guest um, coming to talk to us about video games, creative technology, game industry, all that fun stuff. This week we are joined by Tom. How are you, man?
I'm doing well, Chris. How are you?
I'm good. So you and I have known each other since nearly the dawn of time, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
for many years now. Many, many years.
and you have, well, originally you were in Chicago when we first started uh,
Yes.
hanging
Yep.
out, and now you've moved to beautiful California.
It's true. It's supposed to be 81 today. I'm very excited. So I
Oh, nice.
moved. Sorry,
It's
go ahead.
pretty warm. Actually, it's 81 here too, strangely enough.
That is funny. Yeah. No, I know it's not the warmest, but it's definitely consistently nice, which has been definitely helpful when I can go outside and take a walk. So it's good
Yeah.
stuff.
Columbus, Ohio is not consistent in any way.
It's
So,
true.
um,
Still love it though. I love Columbus. It'll always have a special place in my heart.
oh, well, thanks. Well, I guess we can start there because we've got GX coming up in 3 weeks, right? Oh my lord!
Yeah.
And you've moved stones. You've asked the gods, and you've been able to come this year. Currently, you're
Yes.
going to be able to join us. You weren't able to join us last year because of all the pandemic fun.
Yes.
Um, so I am super excited to have you this year. Why don't just real fast before we get into that, give like a quick little background on who you are and what you do.
Sure. So, I actually started life, believe it or not, as an opera singer. So, originally, my first life was being a musician. Believe it or not, not as fun as you might expect. Very kind of cool on paper, but when it comes down to it, it's kind of a pain in the ass. So, really, at the end of it, I figured out I needed to do something else, and that's, kind of where I started into technology. My dad had been an owner of a tech company for a long time, so for me it was kind of the opportunity, really easy to kind of slide into that. I started at a mobile app company, worked at a big data company, and then eventually I kind of figured out I really wanted to like blend my two passions for entertainment, what I had gotten from that side, my love of games and technology, and so working in the gaming industry seemed like a really great way to do that. So I started in the indie scene in Chicago, probably, God, what, 7-ish years ago. And it was really great to kind of work with a lot of indie devs and work with a lot of people in Chicago, get to know a lot of people. And then I can't believe it's been 5 months already, but about 5 months ago, I took a new position, which is why I moved here to LA, and I am currently working with NCSoft as a senior marketing manager of technology. So very cool.
So, so two things. One is that has to be pretty exciting to move into the. Uh, I hesitate to say. I always joke when you move from like the indie scene into like the AAA, like you've gotten a real job now. Um,
Right?
but I mean, you've moved up into a prestigious company, and I'm sure you're getting to do a lot of cool stuff that um, you weren't able to do before.
Yeah, absolutely. It's working with indies is fantastic, and I think I'll always want to help indie developers where I can, whether that's going to be through things like talks, like things through this podcast, for education, just talking about the industry in general. Um, and I think it has been really interesting, and something that I've always talked about is wanting to do again these campaigns at scale, right? So understanding what it the difference between taking a small developer and helping bring their baby to market, right, versus helping larger organizations who have established titles and who have obviously a long history and some really cool stuff, and helping take new stuff over the line. It's been very cool so far. So luckily, I've been around for the recent release that we did of the Guild Wars 2 expansion, End of Dragons, which was really cool. So it was really cool to be a part of that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and you've spoken about this for years and years, but when we think about the marketing pipeline for indie developers, uh, I think we tend to see indie developers, at least smaller, newer ones, they get really excited about the design and development part of their product, and they don't spend a lot of time thinking about what happens when you kick it out the door, right?
Sure.
When your little product has to grow up and go out into the wild. Um, and so I've always found your talks really interesting because I think that's one of the big areas that just smaller studios in general they just need help with. Like they don't
Yeah.
even know what questions to ask, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one thing I always, try to help indie devs with, at least when when I was working, obviously, so before I used to have my own company, Hyperion, Marketing, which was helping small indie devs. And obviously, I switched positions now and I always want to, but I want to continue on that education aspect of it, right? And be able to help people through other ways, whether that's through talks or the education. I've always been really passionate about helping indie devs figure out those hard questions, right? Whether I'm being paid for it or not. And I think that it is it's very difficult to talk to a lot of indie devs about marketing, and not necessarily for the reasons that you might think. And some of it is because for a lot of devs, it isn't something that either they've had a whole lot of training on. So, a lot of schools that they've gone to or a lot of experiences they've had, whether they've gone to college for it or, done traditional training or not, it can be very hard to think about it and understand the differences because it's so different from what their normal everyday day to day is, right? That having an eye for and an understanding of how to market your game can really is drastically different than the kind of development aspect that you're focused on when you're building something out, right? You're really focused on the operations side, making sure that you have everything together. You're really focused on the development side, and marketing is a completely different animal, and is something that I always tell people you need to start thinking about early, and you need to continue thinking about for a long time. Whether even after your game is released, right? Release is only one part of your game's life cycle, and understanding that is really huge.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you a couple of like boots on the ground questions, but I want to
Sure.
hop on this thing first because you kind of hit on it with just the idea of marketing. First of all, I think it kind of has a little bit of a bad, it leaves a little bit of a bad taste in people's mouths sometimes when they think about like the marketing aspect, of like selling yourself aspect of it. Um, but there's also there's this term called the Midwest humble that a lot of just Midwesterners you don't really brag about yourself. You don't want to kind of be out there putting yourself out there. You're a little more humble. But I think that does a disservice to you because one of the things I always tell people is like you should be if anybody should be proud of the product you're making, it should be you.
Yeah.
And if you're proud of what you're doing and you're doing it honestly, like there's nothing wrong with, showing that energy to the world and being excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and even beyond that, I think there's nothing wrong with getting other people excited about it too, right? That Midwest humble is definitely a thing, right? Taking a lot of your achievements or things that you're excited about and kind of downplaying a little bit is hard, especially when you're thinking about building a community, right? Because you really want to share the cool stuff that you're doing. At the end of the day, a big part of marketing is doing that and understanding how you can share all the cool stuff that you're doing. And that could be anything as little as an upcoming art change to new exciting VO stuff, right? If you're an indie developer, you really should be thinking about all of the different little things that you can be sharing all the time. Um,
Yeah, I
it's
think
it. No, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say I think that's a really astute observation because even in the creation of GDEX, you know, we don't really call ourselves we're not just game developers. Like we have a lot of aspects and elements to it, but we started out primarily for game developers to take part in. And even in the first couple of years of GDEX, I found out a lot of interest in voice acting was a big thing. Sound
Mhm.
design and music composition is always like, if it's not number one most requested thing, it's the number two. And that that caught me off guard initially. I was like, wow, sound design and music composition is the thing everybody really wants to know more about. I would have thought maybe it would be, deep diving into Unity programming or something.
right?
Um, so like you're always kind of surprised about where that interest is going to come. So even if you mentioned voice acting, like maybe you got a new character and you got some cool voice lines or something you want to showcase, you might not even think that that's exciting, but there's probably a contingent of folks in your community that are really going to groove on that.
Absolutely. And another thing is really consistency, right? I mean, people, especially for indie devs, have been burned a lot, and they're always worried that the project that they're excited about is going to end up in a dumpster somewhere. So, thinking about the way that you can consistently share with your community, both to encourage your community to engage, but also to make sure that you can show that you're still making progress, still working on it. And again, we're human too, right? There are going to be times where things aren't going well, and it may you might have a couple weeks where nothing happens, and that's all right. But that doesn't mean you can't do other things to share with that, right? Like, oh hey, who's your favorite character so far? All the like. There's so many different things that you can do to generate that engagement and really show that you show your own personal passion for what you're making. It is it I think in some ways too it can also feel uncomfortable to do that because you're really putting yourself out there in a very public space, and for a lot of people, especially people who aren't trained to do that, and I do think there is really some part of marketing that you do have to train yourself to really be out there to talk in a public space. And I don't necessarily mean like this, like you and I are talking, but more as in like to put yourself out very publicly as usually again indie development teams are very small, right? We're talking 1 to 5 people. The people who are working on the game and who really are passionate about it are also the ones out there taking feedback, good and bad. And it takes some real mental effort to continue to do that. And put yourself out there and open yourself up for criticism. It's tough.
Totally. I've said this numerous times on the show, but one of the things I recommend to my students is take a public speaking class. Like, at least work on the process of how do you clearly communicate with excitement your ideas to a group and be able to do that professionally. I mean, I think that's always just a good first start. But let me ask, I guess along those lines, if you could recommend for smaller studios, smaller and mid-sized studios, I don't know, one or two things that like are core importance that they should be thinking of at any point in their dev cycle. What do you think those would be? Putting you on the spot.
Sure. No, that's a great question. Um, I think you need to really have a plan. I think that that's something I always tell people is, put together, especially for small indie devs, put together some sort of a plan that you can stick to. Because again, I think the biggest thing that you need to focus on is consistency. And I think that's going to be the most challenging part of marketing for these smaller devs is understanding how that can work, right? I also think that trying to think if there's any other like things you absolutely have to do. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot, right? But if I was to try to like whittle it down to like one or two specific things, um, the other thing I would say is research. Honestly, there's a lot of times where I've talked to some or had conversations with indie devs, especially in the past, where they would tell me like, okay, well, where is my audience, right? How do I find those people? Um, and you really do have to take the time to understand where your audience is, right? Like, so let's say you're an indie dev and you're making a fighting game. I could make something up. Um, if you're making a fighting game, you need to be engaged with that fighting game community, right? Like and obviously, and usually this happens, right? Usually this happens already. Someone's really passionate about a style of game or something like that, decides to make a game within that realm. Great. Um, but you need to know where that fighting game community is, and you need to engage with them there, right? Is there a forum that they're on? Is it a Discord that or several Discords? Is that on Twitter? Like, you need to understand where your effort is going to make the most impact. And it really does require some research to be able to figure that out. And I think that's true, in all types of marketing, right? I mean, I've worked for non-game companies. I'm working for a company now, which is great. I've worked for myself. I've worked with a lot of indie devs. You can't just put up a billboard somewhere and expect people to come to you. You really have to understand from a very deep level where those people are. Because if you have limited time and limited resources, especially as a new developer, uh, you need to focus on where that's going to make the biggest difference. Because if you're trying to market on top of building a game, you've very limited time, energy, money. You need to figure out the best way to do that. So
Yeah, I think along those lines, the like field of dreams, if you build it, they will come kind of thing. I think that works a little bit to a point where you can get like start putting a little bit of stuff out there. You're gonna get like a little bit of a community. But
sure,
if you're gonna break through some of those larger barriers, you really have to put energy into the system,
yeah,
right? To do that. And I think to your point, you only got so much energy, particularly as a small studio. I mean, you can only do so much. You want to make sure that energy is efficiently used. I
yeah,
mean, we have this conversation every month with GDEX because we do our social media advertising. So we look at the social media platforms. What is giving us the best click rates per dollar? Like what is actually translating into ticket sales, and so we're looking at all these analytics, um, because they shift constantly too. Like sometimes Twitter is the way to go, and then sometimes Facebook. Last year we did a lot of YouTube spending, and we found that YouTube just was terrible. It
yeah,
was awful for events. It just doesn't work. It just didn't seem to work very well for events,
sure.
But we didn't know that until we tried, right? Maybe if we had talked to you, you would have told us not to spend money on it, but too late now. Well, I guess along those lines, just from your sort of experience, are you seeing any shifts in the sort of social media marketplace, at least as far as games go, or any platforms? Twitter's kind of been
Yeah,
the
a lot of game
place
devs
for
aren't.
games,
Yeah,
but
a lot of game devs are on Twitter. It depends so much on what type of game you're making and where your community is and a whole bunch of other stuff, right? I mean, certainly, some of the bigger platforms now, especially with, Gen Z, are things like, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. Millennials obviously, a big, they were, some of the first on Facebook, some on Snapchat, other things like that. It depends on, again, what you're looking at, right? I mean, I wish I could say that there was some like overarching trend that you can follow that like, oh, you'll find success here, but the reality of it is that's just not how it works. Like you really need to double down and understand where are, your people. And again, that goes back to that research aspect, right? Is, are you going to try stuff and see if it works? Are you going to, do some research beforehand and see if you can find people that way? I think you need to do both. Very much like you were talking about with, your event, you need to understand what's going to work. And like you were talking about spending ad dollars, most little indie devs don't have ad dollars to spend. $1,000 for ads for them is a massive investment in a lot of cases, right? These are people that are working, out of their garage or working their second job as an indie dev, right? They're working
hmm
some job whether in games or not, and then working on their own project. There's a ton of different things that you have to consider there, and it's hard to
I've
make bed.
as I say, I've worked at businesses that are spending 25 to 30% of their budget is allocated into marketing. And for an indie studio, the idea of spending 30% of your budget on marketing is just completely untenable. You'd be
Yeah,
lucky to spend 5%.
yeah, exactly, and that's why I think when people when I talk to really small indie devs, what I'm thinking is since that you can't really spend that, you need to think about that from an effort perspective, right? So, for again, a lot of companies invest a lot of money in marketing, and that's part of the game you have to play, especially, uh, that's the way it works. But if you don't have that money to spend, the second best way to do that is to invest 30% of your time into doing marketing stuff. Um, which I think some people are going to find confusing and just say like, wait, I should be taking a third of my time away from the development aspect to do that. And I honestly, especially as a small developer, I would absolutely say yes. You need to take at least that amount of time to, and don't think about it as marketing is just like, oh, I just got to post, oh, I just got to do that. It's like it's engaging and building your community, because if nobody knows about you and nobody's excited about it like you are, it's not going to go where you want it to go, right? And especially as a small dev, I think there's often two paths that I've seen, at least when I've talked to some of them. People who are looking to kind of break into the more commercial aspect of games and develop a product, right? And something they want to sell. And there's some devs that want to create products or projects really that are going to help them find a job. You can do either. That's totally fine. But if you really want to like sell your game, which is a entertainment technology product in a extremely competitive and very full space right now, you need to really think about it, like a business plan, like a business product, like a business that you're going out there. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of devs that I've talked to have kind of especially indies have really backed away from the idea of it being a business thing. Like, ooh, that's scary, that's too formal, that's too, and it's not. It's the way it is. Like, just if you'd want to sell, I don't know, a widget, right? You can make up something. If you're selling a product that you want to create, if you were going on Shark Tank to sell your newest, I don't know, squeegee, right? Like, make up something. All of those people have business plans and marketing plans, and you should too. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's too
I
businessy, right? Like,
at last GDEX, I had a conversation with someone who's been a part of the community for a long time. We were having drinks and stuff, and I was we were just chatting about game dev and business creation and stuff. And he said something along the lines. He's like, you're always coming at it from the business angle. I'm paraphrasing here, but I was like, you have to.
mm-hmm.
Like, if you're not, then you're just sort of spinning your wheels. And like, he was talking about uh how his company is one of the ones that like he grabs lots of students and he gives them opportunities to come in and develop, and he's really about building the community. And I'm like, look around you, dude. Like, we're sitting in a 10,000 person event having a drink. You don't think I'm working on building a community and getting students involved in stuff? But you also, if you don't have that underpinning machine moving that can pay your people and cover Unity Pro costs and allow you to go to conventions and allow you to market, like, you're just not going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm also kind of a weirdo where I look at my life as like Chris Volpe is a business, and I don't mean that in the like, Wall Street shark kind of way, but like, I have a budget that I plan my stuff out. I do a net worth statement every
The
month so I can
Volpe
see
of
where
Wall
things are
Street.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's important to have those things. We've talked about networking, because you were talking about hiring for a second. One of the things I talk to my students about is the importance of networking, and like a lot of them are just like, I mean, I don't want to go and like hobnob with people. Like, it's not about these transactional relationships. It's about going and meeting people where you can make like you and I didn't know you from Adam, right? Until we met. And then now I know you.
Yeah.
And and like, you build those relationships over time. And then if you need something from someone for whatever reason, you can go to them as a friend instead of like a random person sending email.
Sure.
Right. And this person knows you, so they're going to be able to provide you insight. And then if you really get to a good point, I think this applies with marketing, hiring, whatever. You can get to a point where that stuff starts to come to you.
Yeah.
Where job opportunities come to you, where you're like, you send me an email like, hey man, this job opening just opened up. I think it's perfect for you. Are you interested? Like, and that's a lot of people call that the abundance cycles. You reach that point where things come to you. But I remember because you were talking about the flood, how flooded the market is right now
Yeah.
with games. I think it's the same way with jobs. I mean, COVID kind of like messed around jobs a little bit, but in the game industry, there's a lot more people that want to be at these larger studios like you're at than there are job positions available. And I remember one student, I was talking about networking and building your portfolio and connecting. And he was like, I don't understand any of that. Why do you have to do all this stuff? Shouldn't the best person get the job? And I was like, tell me what the best person is. And they're like, well, I don't know, whoever can do the job the best. I was like, if Bungie puts out a call for a 3D artist, let's say, right? They're probably going to get thousands, if not tens of thousands of applications, right? 80% of those are probably all going to be roughly in the same bucket. 10% are going to be not worth looking at. And another 10% are probably going to be in that like very experienced tier. So how do you differentiate between 10 people that all have roughly the same experience, you know? And it's going to come down to leadership experience, network experience, community development, volunteerism, like all those things that they talk about consistently. Um,
And I
but
think that
I
that's
good.
no, yeah, I think that that's true in and out of games as well, right? Like if no
Hmm.
matter, I mean, certainly, again, uh, I think depending on any sort of very competitive industry that you're looking to get into, um, you really do have to figure out a way to stand out, and whether that, and like you said, whether that's going to be what it looks like on your resume, but networking and connecting with people is so important. And I always tell people, especially students or indie devs this as well, not just for jobs. I mean, certainly jobs are some part of it, right? I mean, especially if you find an industry that you're passionate about and you want to work in, great, like that's fantastic. But also because it helps you get in touch with that industry that you're passionate about, right? Like meeting people in the industry, connecting with those people, working with them gives you great opportunities to, learn more about um, how the industry works in general, how
Totally.
the people that you like, or the types of people in the industry you want to work with, and if you think about it too, right? Even as a developer or in marketing or in sales, like there's a lot of subgenres within that you want to think about, right? Like meeting people who do different things in games or any industry helps you understand what you might want to move towards, right? I mean, like, like if you think game artist, right? There's environment artists, there's character art, there's rigging, there's so many different things that 3D art, there's 2D, there's so many different things that you can go down, and in figuring that out, I think networking with people and meeting with people and going to events like GDX, or going to local meetups, national meetups, things like GDC could be, any of the other big packs. Getting opportunities to do that helps you, I think, just get both your feet into this, an industry that you care about. So, oh,
Yeah, she's not sure. I put a bed for her on my
yes.
desk. You know, it was the bed that used to be next to me at the office, and we closed the office down with COVID. But now my cat has also started using the bed. So baby's like she just stares and not quite sure what's going
She's
on.
like, hey, that's my bed. Why would you
Yeah,
do that?
she might
You're
have
gonna
to
have
go.
to
You gotta go
show.
potties.
You definitely have to show baby just for a second, because I think.
There she is.
Oh, how old is
I
she
know.
now?
She turned 10. She turned 10
Wow.
in March 1st. So she's actually I was uh chatting with somebody. I'm gonna put her there. But she's as old as GDEX is.
That's so funny.
So yeah, so we were actually talking about events a little bit before we started rolling up because I think our events are important, but there has definitely been a shift. I would say a pretty large shift in events because of COVID. It has changed the kind of the landscape of events. We talked about E3 a bit, where I don't even. I mean, E3 used to be like the big dog, like one of the big dogs for. It was the retail show in the United States,
Yeah.
and this is the third year, right, that they haven't had it. And I don't know if it's going to come back. And actually, Jeff Keighley's got his Summer of Games event that's happening starting June 9th, same day GDEX starts. Uh, that I think there's a vacuum there
Yeah.
in June for a video game event. So I think he's trying to fill that, which is smart. But I've seen a lot of events either fall kind of into the void, or are they coming back, or we're just not going to see them again. Um, I'm curious, just your sort of general take on that, but also as somebody who's working in the AAA space now, like how are these larger companies even viewing event participation?
I can't talk much for NCSoft because I'm first of all I can't in general, but I'm here, and I think it's actually a good prerequisite. I'm here just kind of for, for my opportunity to help out with stuff, but I also am not on the event side, so I don't know. But I think from what I've seen in paying attention to some of the indie events that I've uh just seen in general, or even larger events, I think that um I think there was already some talk, at least from what I had heard before E3, of people wondering like, what is the point of E3 now? Where is it gonna go? I think that uh, I think that COVID has, with a lot of industries, kind of accelerated what was already happening in a lot of ways, and I'd heard
Mm.
that like used a lot, whether that was um, organizations falling apart, or services that people no longer wanted, stuff that just really was kind of maybe on the way out anyway. I think COVID has helped move some of that out. Obviously, it's going to be different for smaller events where their continued participation every year is really important. I think that, at least from what I've seen, obviously I think that the effects of COVID aren't over. The pandemic isn't over yet, unfortunately. But I do think, once things are different, that we will hopefully see a lot of events either come back or new ones start up. I think that it has, I know, increased the cycle for kind of the death and rebirth of events anyway, which I think I had seen, at least in Chicago, whether that was some indie events popping up and then falling by the wayside. Some have been really consistent, like GDEX, which is fantastic, where also you've had a big digital component too. um I think
Yeah,
for accessibility, so go ahead.
I was gonna say we had the benefit, I think. So we debated doing a GDEX during 2020 because obviously we couldn't do it in person, and we were
Sure.
like, should we even do anything, or should we just? And the team rallied around doing something. That's where GDEX TV came from, and now we've kind of continued GDEX TV in some ways. But I think we had the benefit because we were already familiar with all these technologies. When everybody went to remote work, they're like, now we got to start using Zoom and all these other. And it's like we use Discord and Google Meets and stuff. Like we were so familiar with the tech. We already had the microphones. We already had the
Yeah.
system set up. So like it didn't impact us too much. But with that being said, when we did GDEX TV, I mean, we didn't earn any money. Like we lost money on that.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
if we weren't able to come back in 2021 and do an event, which we didn't make much money on the 2021 version either, but that was in person. We at least made something on it. Um, if we would have had to have done another virtual event in 2021, I mean, I don't know if we would have been doing an event this year.
Right.
I can see where some of these other events would really struggle, and events in particular, because like the product is going to a place.
Yep.
And if you can't go to a place, at least with video games, you can still sell the thing digitally, right?
Yeah. And I completely agree with that, and I think that I'm hoping that some events will continue to have a pretty significant digital component, and not necessarily by meaning, uh excuse me, let me say that a better way. And I don't necessarily mean that a lot of events will stay digital, but have some sort of digital component of it as well, because I think it's really been a huge benefit, especially if you're thinking of indie devs, right? For accessibility, and so they don't have to necessarily fly all the way across the country to go to things like PAX or stuff like that. If some years that they just can't afford that. Um, I think that going to events in person are still critically important. Again, not just for networking, but to meet people, whether that's you're going to make friends, to learn more about the industry, to have conversations that you may not have expected. I do think that's important, and it's tough, right? Because you have to balance that sort of like, what are you comfortable with right now? What do you want to do? Um, and yeah, I think just like everyone else, I wish things were different and this was over and we could all just get back to doing fun stuff and not have to worry about it as much. Um, yeah, but until we get there, I think things, if you're talking kind of like at least from some of the other event people that I've talked to in the in indie scene, that I think that some are going to be on hold for a while still. Some are going to be coming back. Some are figuring out hybrid stuff. I think it depends on what the comfort level is and the passion and the money of that current group has. And I really hope to see a lot of those events come back. And I'm really glad of events like GDX haven't gone away, because I think there are some
Me too.
that are yeah, are really
I'm,
mainstays that
I I
need to
might be
continue.
biased here, but
Well, I mean that, yeah, especially for 10 years. So, um,
yeah,
yeah,
I agree. I think you said a lot of things. Back to the first thing you said about, in essence, you were talking about the system had all these inefficiencies in it, and money can cover up a lot of inefficiencies.
yeah,
Like if you have money, that can cover a lot of just your organization being a hot mess, right? As soon as that money starts to dry up, then those cracks begin to show, and I think a lot of larger companies began to buckle a little bit, not like collapse, but they began to realize that like their foundation maybe was not as strong as they
yeah,
thought it was, right?
yeah.
So I definitely think that that's a part of it. And then for things like E3, E3 used to be a retail show, so that's where your Best Buys, your Walmarts, your Targets, they would go because they wanted to see what they should stock on the shelves come next holiday.
Yeah.
And so that made a lot of sense. But now we have all these digital shows and stuff that kind of started to become less important. I mean, even Sony just recently, I don't know if you saw, they downsized something like 80+% of their event team. They just
Wow.
they got rid of them. So that would indicate to me that PlayStation is probably not looking to do a lot of in-person events, and they're going to start to be selective of them.
Yeah.
One of the things, one of my thoughts, sort of our strategy with GDEX before COVID, and we may have to rethink this now, but I was always wanting to turn GDEX into an event that could be like an E3 kind of thing. I always consider us like a cross between GDC and like PAX, like game developers and then gaming kind of culture and fandom.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, at least in, obviously we're not anywhere near that size, but just sort of in philosophy. But I always thought it would be really cool for GDEX to represent a place where companies could come and do product launches and announcements at that didn't have the cost associated with doing something in LA,
Mm.
where or New York, where just the cost to throw an E3 press conference is got to be phenomenal. When
Mm.
Xbox or PlayStation does one. So like, why would you spend 200, 300, $400,000 doing something at E3 when you could do a direct, like a Nintendo Direct, probably costs them what, 20 grand,
Yeah.
like,
Not
so
definitely not. Yeah, definitely not as much as it does to be in person. That's for sure.
yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of people standing in front of like a white screen most of the time.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm very curious where the sort of event space is going to go. But I agree. I've been told multiple times, I guess tooting our own horn here, but that a lot of people consider GDEX almost like a family reunion of sorts. Like once a year,
Mm.
they get to come and connect with folks that they don't get to see. Like I now that you're particularly now that you're in California, I mean, we don't get to see each other really at all except for GDEX.
That's
And
true. Yeah.
there's a lot of people that I only see once a year, so it's kind of like it brings that feeling back. But yeah, I'm not sure how what the role events are going to play, because I don't know if from a marketing angle, is it worth the time or the money? If you're just looking at a purely marketing budget standpoint, my guess is you can probably get a lot more bang for your buck by doing online advertising or digital events.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and I think it a lot of it's going to depend on, um, what each company is focused on, right? I think, and I think 5 years from now we'll probably have a good idea of what that actually looks like. But I think so much is still in flux, and so much is still changing. Whether that's in just events in general, whether that's in how specifically what game events are being focused on right now, and some of it is just again still ironing out how to get people in and out and around safely. It's um, I had a bunch of friends that went to GDC this year, and all of them got COVID, unfortunately. Like, right, like
Mm.
it's one of those things where it's still uh it's hard. I think it's just hard. It's just hard. I definitely don't envy people like you
Yeah.
that are running events. I really,
Well,
it's an incredible challenge, and I can't even imagine the kind of risk reward that you have to pay for that.
we
So
have had a lot of conversations about it, and I'll mention, my background's public health, so I'm like,
yeah,
I have a
no, I know,
graduate
and
degree in that, and so
yeah,
like
yeah,
I'm thinking about those things, but there is also a realization that the world's going to have to come to, which is COVID is endemic. It's not going away. There is no post-COVID world. It's
sure,
going to be around forever, just like the flu is now. It's just become too concentrated. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be paying attention to it and taking precautions.
of course,
GDEX this year is a vaccination required show. So, everyone that comes needs to have their vaccination. Now, whether or not we'll keep doing that year after year, that's a conversation we will keep having when we look at the numbers and stuff like
sure,
that. But there is a reality that COVID came and it's going to be here for a while, if not forever.
yeah,
Thus the term endemic, right?
yes,
Um, and I think this does give us a really interesting opportunity to think about how, I mean, it's already redefined just the nature of work, right? Like, working remotely from home, which is funny because my wife, she works at IBM, and she worked at another company here in Columbus. Her company got bought out by IBM. The first thing they did was sell 3 of the 5 buildings and told them to go work from home. So
wow,
she's been working from home for like 12 years. So when the pandemic hit, it wasn't, she just woke up and kept working, you
yeah,
know? Um, so I think it's definitely redefined work and sort of reshaped what people expect from work and what they're willing to tolerate from a job, which I think is great. I think that's a really great thing. We're getting a little tight. I kind of want to hit on something because
sure, yeah,
I
no,
think this is
I think we kind of spiraled there. Sorry.
no, dude, this whole show is a spiral. I've been spiraling for like 6 months here. Lucas can attest to that. Uh, but I want to talk about all these acquisitions that have been happening, these big acquisitions, because I have been looking at Xbox and PlayStation and how they're choosing to buy these companies, right? But one of the things that I don't know if it's talked enough about, at least in my opinion, is yes, these companies are buying these, like Xbox is buying Bethesda because they want access to the IP, obviously, right? That makes sense. But I think there also is a little bit of like a gauntlet throwing down piece to this where it's like PlayStation can't just let Xbox keep buying stuff, right?
Mm.
And so, PlayStation's like, well, we're going to buy Bungie. And then Xbox might come back and we're like, we're going to buy whatever. And then there was recently, the most recent one that I saw was well, I'm totally blanking on the Ember purchase of all the Square Enix
Yeah,
properties,
I
like
saw that too.
Deus Ex and stuff, which I know I love Deus Ex, and Square Enix wasn't doing anything with it. So,
Me too. I loved Deus Ex. Growing up, that was one of the first games I had on PS2, and it took me a while to get into, but once I got into it,
yeah.
oh my god, I couldn't stop. It was so much fun.
Yeah, the old games are great. They're not super accessible, but they're awesome.
No, I would also say that if you were going to go back and play them now, they would be pretty rough. But at the
Oh yeah,
time, it really blew me away. So
totally, totally.
yeah.
But my larger thing is I feel like there is a little bit of a marketing angle to how they purchase these companies, how they present the purchase of these companies,
Mm,
because it is, if the general populace sees PlayStation buys X, that is, I mean, that's in all the IGNs and the GameSpots and whatever. I mean, that falls within this marketing promotion sort of line. At least I've felt that it does, and I don't know if you share that thought or at all.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's a really hard one because I think a lot of what's been happening at least mirrors what I see in a lot of other industries too, which is that consolidation is just happening everywhere, right? Like, I don't know
Yeah.
if you've noticed, but I feel like I remember when I was, still living back in Chicago, all of a sudden I realized all of the kind of local hospitals or medical centers or stuff like that all of a sudden became under this one giant umbrella. They were all bought up at the same time, right? Like, I've noticed that a lot of companies have, or at least from what I read, that a lot of companies had money from the pandemic or had been building up a war chest and trying to figure out what to do with it, right? Like Apple, had all that money and had to figure out something, right? Like, it's you can't hold on to that forever. Um,
I don't know.
I
Apple seems to.
yeah, well, yeah,
They've had like $250 billion just sitting in a bank forever.
sure. Yeah, and again, I can't spepe to these company strategies. I have no idea, at the end of the day. But I think
Sure,
that
we're just
they're
speculating here.
yeah, yeah, I think that uh it's a good question. I think it's um
You know what it reminds me of a little bit? It kind of reminds me of professional sports. And I'm not like a big sports guy, but like how players are traded and negotiated amongst teams and stuff. That's kind of how it feels like they're telling these stories, like when PlayStation bought Bungie, it wasn't just PlayStation bought Bungie, right? It's
mhm.
like PlayStation bought Bungie, which was a huge part of Microsoft's, like that was their leading studio, and so that's almost a story in and of itself on how that can be played out, and PlayStation has to be mindful of that, right? Like they don't live in a vacuum. They have to be aware that if you're going to buy Bungie, it's probably going to create some kind of narrative, right?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I think that that's a good question. I think I'm sure there's some vision that they have for that. Again, it's I wish I knew, but I don't.
Are you telling me you don't run Sony's marketing campaigns?
I don't know.
Well,
So
maybe the next time you're on the show.
that would be funny. No, yeah, no, it is interesting to see that sort of industry consolidation. And I think that
Do you think it's good overall for the industry, or too early to tell?
mm, I don't know. I don't know. I think that it's gonna happen. I think that it's one of those things that it's I think that consolidation in general can be challenging. I think that there are some things that will probably be made easier for some consumers, and I think some stuff that probably, um, be challenging in other ways. I think that it's just so hard to tell, right? Especially because if you're like you were talking about, a lot of these have just recently happened. It'll be interesting to see again, like 5 years from now, what changes happened because of that. And that's, I think, what I'm very interested in is what does that mean, right? Because I think
Hmm.
that there are, very much like you were saying, there's those stories behind, um well, not necessarily behind, but the stories of what that means as well. It'd be interesting to see what that means just in general too. So what that means from a product standpoint, what that means from IP standpoint. It'll be really cool. Like you said, like Deus Ex. I love Deus Ex. I would love to see some new stuff come out with that. But who knows? Who knows what their
Yeah.
vision is? Who knows what their plans are? Um,
I've
I
been
think that.
saying for a long time that I really wish PlayStation would buy Konami, just
Mm,
because there's these IPs like, again, Metal Gear. I mean, Silent Hill. The Silent Hills story is like heartbreaking. Like, Hideo Kojima makes that awesome PT demo, and then they just kill the whole thing, and it's like it just seems like a waste. Like if you're not going to
mhm.
use the IP, give it to somebody who is going to do something with it. You know.
Did you play PT?
Oh yeah, I never beat it. Cody and I played it, and it took us like 3 hours, and we could never beat it.
I remember playing PT on my friend's. I'm sorry, I'm gonna go down this diatribe because it's still one of my favorite
Do it.
horror games. I I got into horror games later, and you talking about it just reminded me of how much I enjoyed, because I haven't thought about PT in a while, but I
Mhm.
absolutely love PT. I thought it was fantastic, and it was something I remember beating after, like, the kind of after, I don't remember who figured it out. I think it was some streamer figured out, like, kind of how to go forward in the game. I don't remember the history of it exactly, but I remember sitting on the couch with me and my friends, and we went through the whole game, turned off all the lights, did the whole spooky time, and it was really, really interesting, and I could really tell that it was something that was, like, really, really different, and
Yep.
it was really exciting because I was like, wow, this is really, um it's so different. It's been cool to see the impact that has on stuff like RE7, right? Like, or and like
Totally. Totally.
and how that kind of, like, even just a demo like that was eventually recalled and disappeared, uh impacted so much of where horror games, went to. And I think that that's is so cool. I absolutely love it. Like, I remember probably, God, it's probably 10 or 15 years ago with my friend playing Silent Hill 4: The Room, which I think was
Mm.
my one of my favorite horror games, and I think that's what really got me into horror games in general. And I've always loved the horror genre, especially now, I think, as I've gotten older. It was, oh my gosh, it's so cool.
I'm a wuss, so like I don't do horror games because they scare me. But
That's fair.
I played PT and I really liked it. And I just I like Hideo Kojima. The dude's weird as shit, but he's somebody that like understands games as a medium. Like the way you would think about like Alfred Hitchcock or Stanley
Mm,
Kubrick, how they understand film as a medium. Like you can make a movie, but some people understand how movies work and how you can like
mm.
tell a story. I
Yeah,
think Hideo Kojima understands that in games.
that's a good way to put it. I think that is very interesting, and I think that, um yeah, I think that's part of the reason why I've always loved Kojima games as well. For me, I think the experience of being a character, and, like, being having the experience of doing something in a game, and I think that that sort of character development has always really spoke to me, or at least the way that Kojima games do it in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
It almost feels like playing a movie, and I think there's something about that always was really fun for me in the way that I just played games in general. So
Yeah. One of our watchers said that PT changed me. The bathroom scene was so scary, so
that's true.
creepy.
Yeah, the bathroom. Yeah, the bathroom scene was really creepy. It was,
I just loved like just the idea of like just going through that loop, and just the way the level, because it's really interesting. You keep going down, right, and then you come back in
yeah,
this door, so you're always going down, which I thought was like a little cool. You don't really notice it, but like it's a very
yeah.
subtle little thing. Um, yeah, I mean, ultimately I think the past 10-15 minutes, some of the questions I've been kind of asking you, it's just about stories, right? Like, what is the
Hmm.
story of the Bungie acquisition? What is the story behind this or that? And one of the things I've talked to a couple other guests on this show was that I feel very privileged that I got to grow up at the start of an industry,
Mm.
and like gaming where it is now compared to where it started, like I've been alive for pretty much that entire time, right? I can't say that about movies. I wasn't around when movies started, so I can go back and see them, but I can't tell how they grew.
Sure.
Definitely not music or books or whatever. But I think it's pretty rare when you get to like see a new thing and that you love, and you get to see it grow over time and how it changes and how the technology changed and the graphics changed and now how storytelling is changing in games.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like my first console was N64, right? And that was my, like, first real experience in game stuff. And I played a little bit on computers too, because we had, like I said, my dad um had a technology company growing up. So we had a computer in my house pretty early, which was kind of cool. And he always loved games. I remember playing Civ 2, I think, with him at some point,
Mm.
which was really
Civ 2
fun.
is great.
Yeah, Civ 2 was really fun. And he really introduced me to games in a way that I don't think I would have, learned a whole lot otherwise, just because again, I think that was, he it's so funny. I talked to my dad and he's like, "Yeah, I can't play games by myself. I just get too sucked into it." But at the same time, we I have a weekly game night with my dad and my sister where we're playing Diablo. We're going through Diablo 3 right now, which has been really fun.
Nice, that's fun.
Yeah, that's been really cool. I think we'll probably stick with some similar games like that, just because it's fun and everybody loves a loot hoarder, right? You can't go wrong with that.
Dude, I've been playing Path of Exile. Like that is my
Yes.
favorite. That is my favorite game, hands down, right now. I think
Yeah.
that game is amazing.
Um. God, where was I going with this?
I don't know.
Talking about stories,
I interrupted you.
games. No. It's okay. Talking about my yeah. So for me, I think again, I've kind of grown up in sort of what I consider like the 3D era, right? Like the N64 was like the first. Um, since that being my first console, like I never like I knew people and played on a like an NES and or Super Nintendo. Like I knew people that had those, and I played them a couple times. But there was something about like that Nintendo 64 that grabbed me in a way that other those games hadn't beforehand, right? Um, and yeah, like having grown up and like I remember like oh gosh, the some of the images I've seen circulating around recently about like it's like a screenshot from some of the really old 3D games and it's like wow look at these graphics and it's you can see the polygons right like
Yeah,
but it's really funny to see that versus now like the difference in what we're uh seeing now with games right it's crazy and yeah growing up with that has been really really cool and such a fun experience obviously I haven't had the same experience that you had but I kind of wanted
you
to
call
go
me old
through.
Tom.
No, Chris, you're not old. You'll never be old.
Uh-huh.
You're young at heart.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we're getting close to the end here, so I always ask the guests, is there anything else you want to talk about, or how can people get a hold of you if
Sure.
they're curious to know more?
Yeah. I think the only other thing I want to ask Chris is, what are you playing right now, and what are you enjoying? I know you talked a
Uh,
little bit about Path of Exile, but that's
so I've been playing Path of Exile like a maniac. I absolutely love that game. And then I have my game club game. So I've been doing this like book club for games where I post a game every month. And this week's was
that's
Marquette,
fun.
Marquett. I'm going to be posting that up on my YouTube channel. I played that. I really liked that. And it was kind of cool. While I was playing it and streaming it, one of the developers logged on. So I was chatting with him while I was finishing the game.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
but the game I'm looking forward to because a couple like God of War got delayed again and stuff. I think June after GDX, I'm going to jump into Elden Ring.
Nice.
I haven't gotten into it because I just can't. I know it's going to be deep and it's going to suck me in, and I can't do it before GDX. But I
Yeah.
think after GDX, I'm gonna. And June's my birthday month, so it's going to kind of be my
Nice.
treat to myself.
Is Marquette that like recursive game where it's
Hmm.
where you're just going into like
Yeah,
smaller and small? Yeah, it that seemed really cool. I hadn't had a chance
it
to check
was
that out
neat.
yet.
I didn't know anything about it. I just knew visually it was something I was interested in, and I kind
Yeah.
of had it in the back of my mind. I didn't know about the story, and the story actually, if you watch my YouTube thing, I talk about it. But the story really kind of personally hit me because it's dealing with a lot of themes that I'm going through right now. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Nice. Uh, that's awesome. I'm trying to think what I've been playing recently. So I've been playing a lot of GTFO. I play a lot of like four-player PvE games with my friends because I have a Discord group that we play online all the time. So that's a really fun game. It's very challenging. But if you um, it's like you're a prisoner that's sent down to like recover stuff in this essentially world of spooky zombies and a big lab, and it's very cool. It's very challenging, and I really enjoy
What's
it.
it called?
GTFO.
Oh, okay.
That's a very fun game. I've been playing some Crusader Kings 3. I actually love me some Paradox. I've always been a big strategy game person, so that's been super fun. Obviously some Guild Wars 2. Absolutely love that.
Obviously, yeah.
Obviously. And then what else? I don't think there's anything else that I've been.
Can I tell you something silly?
Yes.
So I'm gonna put this out there. Not that a ton of people are watching, but I think when you do things in life, again, back to being proud about stuff, right? You should be proud of your accomplishments. And just for whatever reason, I enjoy this particular character in Path of Exile, the Scion class, and I play on hardcore mode. So if I die, my character dies, you know, and you have to restart or whatever. For the past 2 seasons, and the new season starts next Wednesday, I have been the #1 hardcore PlayStation player
Nice.
on the ladder in the world. And I just like,
Good for
I know
you.
not a lot of people play on PlayStation, and even less people play on Scion or whatever. And I've had people being like, well, I could be the #1. I was like, well, you ain't. Until you are, you ain't, you know? But I was just kind of like, oh, that's cool. It's cool to like love something and then also kind of be validated by being good at it. Like I was playing Fortnite with a friend for a while, and I just got my ass kicked in that. Like I was terrible. Yeah. I got okay at it, but
hey man, the older we get, the harder the Twitch shooters are. I get it.
Yeah, I don't play a lot of multiplayer games because I just don't have the time to like get good at them, you know.
Yeah.
But sweet man. Well, how can folks get a hold of you? Any social media or email or anything?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm at Hyperion Tom on Twitter. If you want to go ahead and follow me or message me there, always happy to help answer indie questions or talk about marketing stuff. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to reach out if anyone's ever curious.
Awesome. And if anybody wants to meet Mr. Tom in person, he'll be at GDEX this year, June 8th through the 12th. Hopefully we will have the schedule. Current plan is to have the schedule out next Wednesday. So that is my fingers crossed. So you can come to the show, meet him in person, talk his ear off. But Tom, thank you so much for coming on and being a part of the show. I know you're a busy guy.
Absolutely. And again, you know, I'm happy to be here. I'm not here on behalf of NCSoft. I always just have to make sure that I say that
one of the things I love about like seeing all my friends grow up and getting these big jobs is there's always that preface where they're like, I am not representing the views and thoughts and opinions of.
Correct.
It's like,
yes.
we know.
No, I know that you know, but I have to.
This is just Tom.
I must do the required conversation. Yeah, no. Again, thank you so much, Chris, for having me here. This has been super great. Again, I'm really excited for GDEX, and I always love chatting with you. And yeah, I can't wait to see you soon.
Awesome. So thank you everybody for watching. Again, you can follow us twitch.tv/Volpe Creates is the Twitch channel. We're also Volpe Creates on YouTube. You can follow me on the social medias at Volpe Creates. And then you can go to volpecreates.com/Discord and be a part of our Discord community. Other than that, we really appreciate you being a part of the show. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next week.
Thank y'all.